show on UDTFM.
Once again, here's Drinking and Talking Fantasy Football with your host, Jake Trowbridge and Dustin Lunt.
Welcome back to DTFF, everyone. You're joining us live. We are half an hour early this evening, but that doesn't change the quality of the content we're giving you.
I think it might improve it. TBD.
TBD. We'll find out at the end. Jake, how are you doing this evening?
I'm tired, man. I'm tired. You know why? Because it's hard work winning your fantasy leagues every weekend, and I won a lot of them this weekend. But it was worth the pain that I had to go through to get it done.
Hey, that is a great feeling. I wish I could share that with you. I unfortunately, a lot of my teams were losing teams. One by design, the rest of them not because I was planning on that. But hey, that's the way the cookie crumbles.
The finger mustache is what really sold it for me on that one. Audio listeners, I apologize. You didn't get to see that finger mustache. It was glorious.
Yeah. Bruce Almighty. No, nothing?
You don't have to call out the references, Dustin. When somebody applauds you in the moment for what
it was more for the people at home if they didn't understand it. You know, they don't have our insane depth of knowledge, useless knowledge about movie quotes.
Our delicate palates when it comes to film.
Mm-hmm. That's what we'll call it. But folks, we've got a great show for you this evening. We are roughly a quarter of the way through the season here, and we've seen some trends take place. Now, these are the players tonight that we're going to cut bait on, because at this point we're like, this is not a mirage. It's not what we talked about previously. This is the real deal. We have enough to understand this is probably what this player is at this point of the season, and will probably be this way for the rest of the fantasy season. So these are players we're cutting bait on. We're getting rid of them, want them out of our life. We're kicking them out like I don't know what. I don't have a good analogy there. I lost my train of thought. It's like Michael Scott there.
One-night stand that you don't want to pay the cab fare for.
That's right. Yeah, it's like Michael Scott hoping I knew where that sentence was going to end, and it just didn't.
Didn't
come together.
Keep trying going forward.
Yeah. But before we get into all that, we have our normal top of the show items to talk about here. First and foremost, Jake, what are you drinking?
Well, for now, I am drinking something tasty, which is an Oktoberfest from Delta Beer Lab. It got a little bit of a hot streak here in Wisconsin over the weekend that's carried into today. I don't care. It's still fall in my mind and in my glass. So that's what I'm enjoying.
And it is October now as well. So
the calendar agrees with me, even if the sun doesn't. What are you drinking?
I am drinking an Oktoberfest as well. This is from Potosi.
Look at us. Yeah. Got a little
heart
around.
I know. Is that nice?
Adorable.
It's not bad. Not my favorite Oktoberfest I've ever had, but it's an Oktoberfest, so I'm not sad about it at all.
There's very few bad Oktoberfests.
Mm-hmm.
There's some mediocre ones, but very few bad. It's reliable.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so finally got on the Oktoberfest train, picked up a couple different 6-packs. So be drinking those for the upcoming season here. I love it. Okay. Well, is there any news you want to talk about, Jake? Or should we just kind of skip this and get in right into the other fun stuff we have to talk about?
Let me get up my blurb in case you don't have a phone, in case you are just completely off of social media. Jonathan Taylor activated off of PUP. He can come back. Jonathan Taylor could be back, but he still has to figure out his contract thing. So if you've been stashing him in redraft, you just hope for the best. Mm-hmm. Your window to trade for him is certainly closed shut, but we'll just have to monitor that.
That's right. That is probably the biggest piece of news that we have. Let's hope he actually plays. Just because he's active doesn't mean he plays. He could just be a healthy scratch, sit on the bench every day and just collect his paycheck. But let's not hope that happens.
We're going to be a little bit more positive than that.
That's right. That's right. All right. So we have here our normal bet of the week that we have to pay out here, Jake. We are on a streak of pretty gross ones.
Oh, yeah.
I don't like it. I'm hoping that changes.
This one
week.
was by design. This was gross by design, though.
I don't think it was supposed to be this gross, though. Like, I knew it was going to be gross, but I mean, we are scraping the bottom of the barrel here with these. So the bet, as a refresher, was the Eagles tight ends versus the Commanders tight ends, which, Jake, you took the Commanders.
Sure did.
The Commanders had 8.9 points as a tight end group.
Ooh.
And the Eagles, with Dallas Goedert and co., an amazing 4.5 points. Fuck me again.
Oh, is it that bad? Which I have to point out, as gross as this is, once again, I basically doubled the fantasy points. So it's a pretty strong victory. When
yes,
you frame it
very
way.
strong. When your whole tight end group as a whole doesn't even crack double digits, that's when you know it's a strong finish.
That's right. That's how I live. That's how I live my life.
That's right. But anyway, Jake, this is to you. You are an amazing fantasy football prognosticator / genius. Cheers, my friend.
I thank you, sir. As you once again put down some fireball. I don't even have to ask or assume at this point. It's done.
Nope.
Well, hey, be thankful that that's all you have to pay out this week, Dustin, because I was less lucky. So that's why I had to gloat a little bit with the tight ends, because my brilliant idea last week was modified start-sit episode, where we essentially put pairs of players people would be debating about putting into their lineups or benching, and we went head-to-head. And we each picked the player out of the duo that we would rather start. We were allowed to overlap, by the way. We could select the same players. And we did. We did for a handful, but we were pretty split for the majority of those players. And Dustin, you crushed me and my hopes.
I wouldn't say crushed. That's a little unfair. I mean,
well,
it was
feels
83.3 to 89.5. I mean, 6 points. That's a touchdown over all those players. It's basically one touchdown away.
And just the highlights of the big discrepancies that we did have. I selected Justin Fields, whereas you took Dak Prescott. Fields had a hell of a day. Dak Prescott, pretty mediocre. I chose Derrick Henry. You chose Breece Hall. Derrick Henry looked like the Derrick Henry of old, at least in the fantasy stat line. Breece Hall had a pretty modest 10-point day. And then we get into the biggins. T. Higgins versus Calvin Ridley. That's somewhat comparable. Higgins left early. Ridley got about an extra 8 points on him. And then the one that put me to rest was Puka versus Tank Dell. I love Tank Dell. I'm obsessed with Tank Dell, arguably too much. And you wisely chose Puka Nacua, who crushed with 30-plus fantasy points. And because of that, because of Puka, I have to do a good old-fashioned beer chug, which we haven't done in earnest on this show in a long time. It's harkening back.
Is that a Modelo?
This is a Modelo. So you didn't even realize it, but a Modelo that you left at my house at some point in one of my coolers, you've contributed. So I didn't take it out of the fridge until I sat down, by the way, just a couple short minutes before we started. So this is going to be nice and nice cold, which is absolutely how you want to do a beer chug. Dustin, you are unequivocally a master of fantasy football. You are a genius among geniuses. I had to ramp it up a little bit because of the stakes here. So cheers to you, and cheers to this Modelo, and cheers to Puka Nacua, most importantly.
That's right. Well, Jake, that is well done. I'm sad to see a Modelo wasted in such a fashion, because it is such a delicious beer. But you took that like a champ.
It's so ice cold. Oh my God. It's, that brain freeze of that first bite of ice cream that you weren't expecting. That's what happened. Oh, fuck.
Yeah. So while you're recovering from that, Jake, here, we do have a question in the chat I think we should address here. This comes from George. Thank you for joining us here, George. I get the value of having a stack of Tua and Waddle on my team, but do I stay the course or move off of Waddle? I'll give you a second here to recover, or 30 seconds for your tum-tum to settle a little bit.
Thank you.
You stay the course with Waddle. We saw what he's done the first couple years in the league. He's been very consistent, very good. He's been a little dinged up to start the year. Tyreek's been doing Tyreek things. I mean, he's just too good a player to stay down for too long. I don't have any concerns about him. I would stay the course. You drafted him high for a reason, and I would stick with it. Don't just let a few games here really get you down on such an elite talent as Waddle is.
Yeah, I firmly agree with you there. I know this is going to be a popular sentiment about Waddle and the sky is falling potentially with him. I agree. I don't think that it is. It sucks. You never want your stud players to start off this sluggish. But to be fair, it's not like he's goosed you at any point. You know, it's not what you're hoping for when he's in your lineup, but he's getting you about those 10 points as of right now. And I fully anticipate that to change in the very short term. Yep. And besides, I don't think you can really trade him away for what you want for value right now anyhow.
Exactly.
In redraft. So go ahead and stick with him.
And I know it's tough when you're seeing all these other players score 50, 60 points in fantasy, but that's not going to continue either. Distribution will be a little bit more even moving forward. Oh, another question here from George. Other predicament is that I own both Dobbs and Christian Watson. Do I keep both or move off of one? Jake, I'll let you handle this one first.
I feel pretty confidently about this. These guys, as much as I wish they were, they are not Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. You should not be rostering both receivers from a team like this in fantasy because it's just never going to work out most times where both blow up in your lineup. It's also going to be very difficult to know which one of them to start in a lot of weeks. I would rather go with what I've seen so far. My eyes have told me Jordan Love really trusts Romeo Dobbs and those fantastic hands of his. I think you can, now that Christian Watson is back and scored a touchdown, get something for him. So I think you should look to move Christian Watson, in my humble opinion. But I've been a pro Romeo Dobbs guy all off season, so I probably have a little bit of bias there. How about you?
Yeah, I guess it really depends on how you want your roster construction, because Dobbs, I feel like, is going to be more consistent throughout the year. I don't know that he's going to give you those game-winning weeks where I feel like Watson, he can blow up for like 3 catches for 90 yards and 2 touchdowns, which could win you a week. So it really depends on how you want to construct your team, and if you want to go with someone that is, in my opinion, more upside, higher ceiling, that's Watson. But if you want someone that you just kind of a plug and play, probably won't goose you any weeks, but probably won't win you a week, that would be Dobbs.
To be fair, I would argue that Dobbs probably won some people a week this past week and Thursday with the 9 receptions for 95 yards. That's pretty solid. You'd like to see a touchdown in there, of course. But yeah, I think it could happen.
It could, but I don't know. Anyway, so should we move on here, Jake?
Let's do it. Let's talk turkey.
Well, we've got our favorite segment back as the drunk trade of the week.
Drunk, hammered drunk.
Drunk trade of the week.
This one's fun. It comes from Reddit. Welcome back to the show, Reddit. Simple. While drinking during the Super Bowl, obviously, I traded DJ Moore for Elijah Moore. This is from Reddit user Rude Dog 1234, who says, I have regrets. Dustin, if we had brought this up a week ago, maybe even 2 weeks ago, I think we'd have a different response to this drunk trade than potentially we do now. What are your thoughts on this one?
I honestly don't know that I would have much of a different opinion as I have now. That's a bad. You should have regrets, my friend. Sorry, Rude Dog. You should have regrets. That is no way, shape, or form an even trade. I know more for more sounds even, but it's not. DJ Moore, at worst, will be like a low-end wide receiver to Elijah Moore. He'll be lucky to be a wide receiver 3 by the end of the season. Lucky at this point with how putrid that offense has looked. And I know Chicago's offense hasn't looked stellar by any stretch of the imagination, but DJ Moore has actually been relatively consistent to start the season. So, yeah, bad trade.
Bad trade. Again, if this was last week, after those first 3 terrible games that the Bears put together, Justin Fields and DJ Moore as well, I'd be saying, hey, there's a silver lining here. And maybe Elijah Moore breakout is still on the way. It's not.
It's not.
DJ Moore's is, however, potentially on the way. Obviously, they don't get to play Denver every single week, so we have to see how it shakes out when the Bears play up against a legitimate defense. But yeah, the regrets are real and earned in this one, Rude Dog.
Absolutely.
Let that be a lesson. Drinking and trading during the Super Bowl, you're just too amped up. It's too much, all going into the pot at once, I think.
Yeah, just sit back and enjoy those commercials. Or watch the Puppy Bowl, whatever you want to do. Like, it's fine.
Fucking Puppy Bowl is great.
It sure is. All right, let's get into the main event here, shall we? Players we're cutting bait on. Now, Jake, I'm going to have you start here. I'll let you pick your position. But yeah, as I said at the top of the show here, these are players that, we've got a quarter of the season away here. We know we expect these players to continue to perform at this level. That's why we're cutting bait on them. So lead us off.
Let me start with the position of positions. It's quarterback. And I'm going to talk to you kids about Dak Prescott and the woes of Mike McCarthy. I think more accurately, it's been bad for Dak Prescott. He is currently the quarterback 25 in points per game on the season. His rushing upside looks a lot like the rushing, quote unquote, upside of the last couple of seasons. Dak post-injury has not been that guy. He's not the Russell Wilson-esque 100-yard minimum rushing season. That's not him anymore. He is currently on pace for about 180 yards, which again is in line with what he's done the last couple of seasons. Kellen Moore, we can't overstate the loss of Kellen Moore. Because if you look at where Kellen Moore went, boy, it's a lot rosier over there. Dak Prescott, unfortunately, is just that guy where if you keep him on your roster at this point, you're sacrificing getting better quarterbacks because he's just enough of that name recognition where you're like, I should put him in my lineup, right? He can't do terrible things to me, can he? And he's probably not going to give you, a 5-point performance, but the ceiling is so capped with him. I would rather be streaming quarterbacks 1,000% than having Dak Prescott sit there and stew in my lineup. Pick up CJ Stroud, pick up Matt Stafford, pick up these guys and play the matchups rather than stick it out with Dak Prescott, who I just think his boom week is going to be like quarterback 10. And that's not what you need in your lineup.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is the loss of Kellen Moore here because Dak was, fringe top 12 the whole time Kellen Moore was there. And all of a sudden he's gone. And I know every season is different. So you can't just say, oh, it's singly because of that. His weapons are pretty much the same. Yeah. Zeke's gone, but Zeke was not Zeke last year. The Zeke of old. It was Pollard was the guy. You had CD. They brought in Brandon Cooks, which is actually an upgrade in my opinion. Jake Ferguson, he's a great young tight end. The pieces are there on the offense, but it's Mike McCarthy's offense now, which we have seen, and Dak is no Aaron Rodgers. So,
although it's not like Dak Prescott is being bad for real NFL football at this point. That's not the case for the most part.
No.
It's just for fantasy. You're saying it. This offense, it's not built to sustain great fantasy relevance. And I just hope that CeeDee Lamb remains somewhat unscathed the rest of the way, because that would be the biggest bummer if he was to fall victim to this as well. But fingers crossed on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jake, my quarterback is Daniel Jones. And this
It's
hurts a
fresh.
bit because I was very high on Daniel Jones this year. He was one of my late round targets. Had I actually waited to draft a quarterback, he was going to be one of my late round targets. Unfortunately, I took Justin Fields, which that's worked out magically so far this year. But enough about me. Daniel Jones, I expected a lot more. We saw what their head coach McAdoo
Oh, sure.
brought to the table last year after his time in
Dable.
Buffalo. Dable, thank you. Why did I think McAdoo? I don't know.
I don't know, but I went with it for a half second. I think I still blame the Modelo chug, if I'm being honest.
Sure. Well, I'll blame that on that too. But we saw what he did coming over from Buffalo, working with Josh Allen. We saw Daniel Jones take a step forward last year. It was like, oh, this is great. He put up a great fantasy season. What was he, like number 8 quarterback on the year? I want to say right around there.
Yeah.
Had a great season. And without Saquon there for a good chunk of the season. You got Saquon back this year. They brought in a bunch of slot wide receivers, which was great to see. They brought in Darren Waller from the Raiders. So I mean, they made some moves to kind of help put some pieces around him. No elite wide receivers, but still all very serviceable in their own way, and excuse me. And this team looks like it's taken a giant step backwards this season. And whether it's teams have figured out this offense and, they just don't know how to scheme to counter that anymore, or Daniel Jones really did just take a step backwards and last year was kind of an outlier season. I don't know, but the offense as a whole just looks putrid. And which makes my heart hurt for Darren Waller, because for both of us, because he was one of our guys. So it's just I just can't trust him, and I just don't see this offense getting any better. They play in a very tough division with very tough defenses, with Washington, Philadelphia, and Dallas. So it's not like their divisional opponents are going to give them any respite here. So I just don't see things improving at all for Daniel Jones this year.
Yeah, if you watched Monday Night Football and saw the sieve of offensive line that he had to deal with in those, was it double-digit sacks? I think it eventually got to double-digit sacks on the night. You just look at that and go, well, I'm not putting it all on him, but it's definitely impacting his fantasy stats a significant amount, especially if you play in a league like ours where there's negative points per sacks and all of that and turnovers. Oh, my goodness gracious.
Yeah.
It was bad. But we don't have to dwell on quarterbacks anymore. By the way, real quick, we were talking about Daniel Jones. Let's keep it going with his tight end that you mentioned prior. So RE in the chat is asking, the wide receiver situation is this. They've got CD, Waddle, Nico Collins, and Tank Dell. So 2 wide receivers from the same team. We discussed this a little bit earlier. Now the tight end is Darren Waller. They want to drop somebody to pick up Jake Ferguson, which I'm on board with picking up Jake Ferguson. But out of this grouping, who would you rather drop? Are you dropping a wide receiver or are you dropping Waller?
Oh, this is tough. Especially coming off of my last statement here about Waller. I feel like at this point, I hate to say it, but I'd probably drop Waller and pick up Ferguson. At worst, you can just stream the tight end position here if Ferguson doesn't work out and just play the matchups. Hopefully, you didn't have to take Waller too early. But at this point, we're quarter of the way through the season. If competing, it's time to make some moves that are going to be impactful. And right now, you just can't trust Waller. I know you don't want to drop him because it's the what if factor. Like, he could go off at any time, and he could. He's had plenty of matchups where he could have. And like really good matchups, and it hasn't happened. So I would lean Waller. I mean, having Nico and Dell, I don't really like having both of them from the same team. If I had to choose one of those, I would take Nico Collins just because he does look like Stroud's number 1 option there. But those are my thoughts. What about you, Jake?
Yeah, I think Nico and Tank Dell have basically been rotating weeks at this point of who's going to blow up which week. So that part can be a headache and frustrating matchup wise. And so maybe you just want to move one for that. Now in the chat, I did say to Ari, maybe try to trade Tank Dell instead of just outright dropping him first. But he hasn't gotten, or they haven't gotten any responses on those trades. So I'm with you. I think just drop Darren Waller, as awful as that feels for me to say. I'm not.
Ari, I'm not going to lie. I have Waller in our home league here, and the thought has crossed my mind here to make that move as well. So I'm right there with you in making a tough decision.
It's awful. It's awful. Well, let's talk about Brandon's tough decision real quick before we move on to our running backs. So Brandon currently has Travis Etienne, Derrick Henry, Kyron Williams, and they're returning, hopefully, Jonathan Taylor. Receivers are Pittman, Wilson, Addison, your guy, London, and Dell. Should I move Pittman and Kyron Williams for Jamar Chase? Or do I wait and let Jamar Chase's value drop a little bit? Dustin, what do you think about this one?
I guess it doesn't matter if this is redraft or dynasty. I would say yes, make that move. You're getting one of the elite wide receivers in the game. Granted, the Bengals offense hasn't looked great so far to start the year, but you're getting the 1B of the top 2 wide receivers in the league that can't. The chance of blow up games and the production is just too great to pass up. Especially with T. Higgins possibly being out here with that rib injury. I haven't heard if he's going to miss time, but it could slow him down a little bit. So yeah, I would make that move. Anytime you can get Jamar Chase, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I'm on board with trading for Jamar Chase. 1,000%. Better days ahead. Don't panic on him either. And he's still getting the ball plenty, even with the circumstances around Joe Burrow. So the only thing I would say is see if you can swap out Drake London instead of Michael Pittman, because I do really like Michael Pittman with Anthony Richardson this year. I'd rather hold on to Pittman if I could. And maybe London and Kyron is just enough if they need a running back to get him to make that move.
I had thought that too, but I was just like, it seems a little low in my estimation. I don't know that I would do that, but I think Pittman and Kyron is fair.
Completely fair.
Hey, how about one last question?
I had good transition at the ready, but that's
sorry.
Okay.
Last question from George here. Is it worth upgrading my RB1 from Tony Pollard to CMC if all I had to throw in was Drake London?
Yep.
Yes. Smash. Yes. 100%. 1,000%. Yes. Do it.
Perfect. Okay. That actually went very well with the previous question. So transition saved 1,000%. We're just saying trade Drake London if you have Drake London.
Basically.
Is it? All right. Well, you can't trade this guy. There's just no way because you're not going to get anything for him. So instead, this is painful. This might be more painful than the beer chug that I had to do at the start of this episode.
Are you sure?
Telling you all to drop Antonio Gibson. I was big time a believer. Finally, this year, they were going to use Antonio Gibson like he ought to be used, like the receiver that he was in college, but out of the backfield. He was going to crush his career high in targets and receptions. And instead, he is sitting here nicely at RB 58.
Oof.
He's not getting targets. Not at all. In fact, he's on a pace for a career low right now. That's super unfortunate. Brian Robinson, though. Hey, kudos to Brian Robinson, who's looking fantastic. We had a beer bet for the season that I'm absolutely just I'll concede at this point that Antonio Gibson is much worse than Brian Robinson.
No, I do not allow concessions at this point of the season. All right. Sorry.
I'm just trying to reverse jinx it. That's all. But I do think with Antonio Gibson, it's done. We've seen it. If we were going to see him be used, what I feel is the right way, by getting a lot of targets out of the backfield, we'd see it. Instead, he's out here looking like generic McKinnon, like the worst receiving running back that is possible. And he's on pace. This is no bullshit for just over 500 total cumulative yards. That's not a guy that you hold on to. I dropped him last week. In fact, right before the game started to pick up Marvin Mims. I was ahead of myself on this one, and I almost couldn't wait to do it. So it's a bummer, but I'm out.
Yeah, it's too bad. And I truly mean that, because I did really like Gibson last year and the year before. I really thought there was going to be a lot of upside there. And for whatever reason, this team just doesn't want to use him. I'm not sure what's going on there. But yeah, hopefully he lands in free agency and catches on with another team that would actually use him and his talents, because he's just wasting away in Washington. Because I do think he is a good player, but what do I know from my chair here in the basement?
Not as much as old Riverboat Ron, that's sure.
That's right. Moving to my running back here, I've got Najee Harris. This one hurts as well. But I wanted to put like every positional player from Pittsburgh on my list of players I'm cutting bait on, because their offense is putrid right now. And it doesn't get any easier for Najee, because you got Kenny Pickett hurt. Will he play? Probably, but still hurt. Deontay Johnson out. You got Pat Freiermuth injured. Like, all the offensive weapons here are essentially hurt that would draw targets or coverage away from Najee. So now teams can just stack the box, and it's just not looking good for him. He's not doing well. He's getting the volume. We're just not seeing anything out of this volume. And it doesn't help that Jaylen Warren is, eating into some of his touches. Hasn't been extreme by any stretch of the imagination, but that is playing a part of this as well. So I can't trust him at this point, especially with how bad that offense has looked.
Yeah, when Najee Harris finally got his workload this last week, and he finally got touches this last week, and I was so excited for him. And he still puts up 11 fantasy points with the most touches that he'll probably get all season long. That's not a good sign. He didn't have anything to offer against the best matchup in the Raiders earlier on in the season. It's not in the cards for him.
No,
it is a super bummer.
And I know part of it, he hasn't scored any touchdowns, but I don't see this team getting anywhere close to the red zone at this point either. So I don't see any touchdowns forthcoming soon unless he happens to break one off.
Agreed. Very much agreed. Gross. By the way, if Deontay Johnson is out there, I'd pick him up, because you can put him on your IR slot and he'll actually get targets when he comes back. It's the only piece in Pittsburgh that I'm even closely interested in.
Same.
Now, in terms of this offense, which is much better than the Pittsburgh Steelers offense, one would assume the Kansas City Chiefs would be aflush with fantasy options for you. And instead, it's the same shit as always. You love their quarterback. You love their tight end. You can make something out of their running backs if you have to. And then there's the receivers, who do nothing for you and your team yet again. Now, we came in, I'm not going to try to make this too much of a back pat here, but we came into the season just down on all of the receivers for the explicit reason of we don't know who in the hell it's going to be, if anybody. So at the end of your drafts, if you want to take a dart throw, fine. Do that. Take a dart throw on the guy of your preference. But you have to acknowledge when it's time to cut the cord. That's the whole merit with dart throws is, all right, I get a couple of weeks to see what's what, and then I drop them and move on. If you haven't dropped them and moved on yet, please do so, because it's not going to work out for you. Every single one of them is outside the top 50 wide receivers right now. Travis Kelce, despite missing the first game, still leads the team with targets by a lot, just as we expected. Here's what's nuts, though. Over the last 3 weeks, Kadarius Toney, a lot of people had hype up on Kadarius Toney. He is tied with their backup tight end, Noah Gray, in targets. I say again, in the last 3 weeks, not the one that Travis Kelce missed, last 3 weeks, he's tied with the backup tight end in targets. He doesn't want to throw to the wide receivers. It just is what it is. And nobody's getting targets in the red zone because there's plenty of scoring opportunities, but none of these guys are getting them. Rashee Rice has gotten, a touchdown, I think, on the season. And that was the first game when Travis Kelce missed. And everybody else they're just slumming it right now. So just do yourself a favor. I could have put the Giants receivers on this list as well, but you already harped on Daniel Jones. I don't want to be too duplicate.
No, of course. We got Scampers joining us in the chat. Evening, Scampers. Thanks for joining us again.
Evening.
Always appreciate that. Yeah, so my wide receiver here is a guy I have been up and down on all throughout his career, and I am down on him this year, which I was actually really kind of high on him going into the season. With the season he had last year, did surprisingly better than I thought. I figured with his quarterback shaking some of the rust off, this offense was only going to improve. It has not. I am talking about the Amari Cooper. Yes, this offense is just hot garbage right now. His quarterback and Deshaun Watson injured. We had was it DTR, Dorian Thompson, something or other.
Robinson, just mumble your way through it.
Yeah, starting as quarterback for the Browns this last week. Rookie quarterback. We don't know how long Watson will be out. It didn't sound like it was too severe, but still, if he's going to come back from injury, it still is always a possibility he could get re-injured. You got Nick Chubb that's out for the year, which you thought, maybe this will open things up on the offense. No, they just give it to Jerome Ford, and because they're a run-first team, even with this quarterback they paid $250 million guaranteed money to. We're not talking about him. We're talking about Amari Cooper. You just can't trust this offense. This is another just putrid offense. Great defense, but on offense, you just can't trust them to throw the ball right now. And as the weather gets worse in Cleveland for their home games, I don't expect things to improve. They play in a brutal division in the AFC North. So schedule is not in their favor either. And I'm out. Get him out of here.
Let me pose this to you.
No.
I think you could trade Amari Cooper to somebody in your redraft league right now because he had a blow-up game in week 3. And if people are like, well, when Deshaun Watson comes back, Amari Cooper's going to saddle back up to that wide receiver 9 or whatever he finishes as that 1 week.
Yeah.
I think you could still trade him.
Do it. I mean, definitely try to trade him if you can. Get your boy Tank Dell. How about that? Would you take that trade?
Yes, absolutely. 1,000% I would do that. But I'm insane about Tank Dell, so I don't know how rational I'm allowed to be in that. I am rational when talking about tight ends for once, though.
Are you?
Once. I think so. Let's see. I want to talk about Dallas Goedert. We brought him up earlier in the show. We were talking about something. I don't know what it was. Maybe the drunk trade. Maybe the shot bet.
It was the shot bet.
Modelo's really on top of me at this point. But Dallas Goedert, God damn it. I swear this isn't a victory lap. And I'll have to say that again at the end because it's going to sound like a victory lap. But Dallas Goedert coming into the season, I said, you can't trust this guy unless one of those 2 stud receivers is injured. So Devontae Smith or A.J. Brown, if one of them's hurt, Dallas Goedert is forced to step up, and he always does so.
Absolutely.
He's reliable in that way, in that very specific way. But outside of that, he is just a roster clogger with this name that you feel like you have to hold on to.
Well, because he has produced in the past. That's the thing.
In the past.
I know, but it's like you said, it's the name, and he has produced. So it's just dangling there. Like, hey, there's points here. There's points right here. I scored them before.
It's more like this now. Now it's just down here, and now it's not even a good tickle down here. And Dallas Goedert is sitting here at tight end 30. He's worse than Kyle Pitts so far on the season. But we're just kind of glossing over the Dallas Goedert of it, even though those two were drafted somewhat close in redraft, maybe a round apart, but still Dallas Goedert. Yeah, he's sitting there as this dead weight that you just feel trapped into starting. I would pick up Zach Ertz Jake Ferguson. Somebody in the chat was asking about Jake Ferguson. I'd pick up those guys. I'd pick up Jonnu Smith. I would pick up Logan Thomas before I want to start Dallas Goedert without an injury to those other running back or wide receivers.
Yeah, I have nothing really to add here because you're absolutely right. Like, he has just not done anything so far in the season, which is really disappointing. But they've got the other big high-powered weapons. They don't need to throw to their tight end. He is at best their third option, maybe their fourth option if you count Swifty there.
Running backs.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's just not a recipe for success at all.
Nope.
At all.
Nope.
All right. Well, I will finish off this conversation here with my tight end, and that is Gerald Everett. Let's be honest. There was probably 15 tight ends I could have chose out of this.
Sure.
I wanted to go Kyle Pitts, low-hanging fruit. Everybody knows to avoid him right now. So I didn't want to do that. So I went with Gerald Everett. And here's why. We see what this offense is doing. We talked about it earlier when we were talking about Dak and the loss of Kellen Moore. Now over to the Chargers. We see this offense, all of a sudden, they're producing even better than they have traditionally or in the past. And then they lose Mike Evans this last week. You would have thought, hey, Gerald Everett's going to get more involved now. Mike Williams is gone. Did I say Mike Evans? I think I did.
It's okay. I was going to let you just slide right through.
No. Mike Williams. My apologies. He didn't get traded. Don't freak. No one freak out. But Mike Williams got out for the year with the ACL. Thought, hey, maybe this last week Gerald Everett would get more involved. They basically have Josh Palmer and Quentin Johnston, the rookie. So maybe he'll be more involved now that they lost one of their main pieces on the offense. Austin Eckler still kind of out dinged up, not 100%. No, he did nothing, absolutely nothing. And I don't know why. He's a good tight end, I feel like. Sure. He has popped off in the past. I don't know what it is. He's not being involved in this offense right now, and you need to avoid him because he is one of those guys that I feel like you look at, especially as a streaming option. You're like, oh, this is a good offense. He's going to get me 10 points easy. Yeah, it's not really the case. So you should be avoiding him. I would drop him at this point if you have him on your roster. As you talked about with one of your other guys, pick, Jake Ferguson. Take one of these other guys. Just stream the position for God's sakes. And just avoid the landmine that is Gerald Everett.
Honestly, pick up Donald Parham, tight end from the exact same team. They'd rather use him in the red zone. So at least you could hope for a touchdown with Parham. You can't even hope for that with Gerald Everett. So I'm fully on your side with this one. Just what the hell? This is a lesson for every punted tight end this season. I think for once, we're harping on this a lot coming into this offseason. Normally, we're the wait and see guys with tight end. This year, we're like, let's get our guys. That's not to give ourselves too much credit because we were both in on Darren Waller. So what the fuck do we know?
But yeah, I mean, like you said, Parham, he's currently number 8 tight end. He's got with the 3 touchdowns. I know that kind of buoys him, but hey, if he's the guy that's getting all the touchdowns, then yeah, maybe he is the guy you should be focusing on. So
can't blame a guy for getting touchdowns. Can't use it against him.
That's right. Okay, well, that finishes that, Jake. Let's take a look forward here. And if we've got time at the end here, we'll do a little week 5 preview here and talk about a couple of the games. Sure. But I know we're on a tight time schedule here this evening. So let's review our starts of the week from last week. Jake, you had Jacoby Myers going against the Chargers, had 5.3 points at a not nice wide receiver 69.
That's what I was hoping for. That's why I picked that motherfucker in the first place.
Yes, I am sure that's it. So sorry, Jake, that one didn't work out for you. Although that was a pretty nice matchup. I went with Kenneth Walker the third going against the Giants. He had 13.9 points, coming in at RB 14, respectable, a fringe RB 1 on the week. So I will take the victory on that. Jake, looking ahead to this week, why don't you tell the folks who you got, because this was actually going to be my start of the week, and I changed it at the last second.
Okay, now out of respect, I have to say a little peek behind the curtain here. I waited to put my start of the week in because I thought that you were going to go with this guy, and I was like, well, let's just wait and see. Let's wait and see what he goes with first before I just plod in there and take him, but you didn't, so I did. I'm talking about Breece Hall, who gets to play the best defense for fantasy football right now that exists in the Denver Broncos. So, in a normal week against a different team, I might be inclined to start the quarterback. Now, the quarterback happens to be Zach Wilson. So I have pivoted to the running back this week in Breece Hall. We saw Devin Achane. We saw Raheem Mostert. We saw Khalil Herbert. All have sterling weeks for fantasy against the Denver Broncos within these past couple of games. Breece Hall has been very frustrating with his usage. You mentioned just this past week here, Dustin, where he got 10 points. 10 points. And I thought, well, that's better than it could have been because it's been kind of depressing if you're watching how they use Breece Hall. They're still forcing Dalvin Cook into the picture, which just doesn't make any sense. But against this defense, especially with Zach Wilson doing better than I thought he would this past week, admittedly, let's bolster his confidence. Let's use our star running back who can break off big gains against this defense. I think we're going to see a lot of him early on. And then once they hopefully build up a lead, because the Jets defense is really good, and I don't trust the Denver Broncos offense that much, I think that we'll see Breece Hall even late in the game. So banking on a top 15 finish here for old Breece.
Yeah. And I just want to take a little moment here to just talk about the Chiefs Jets game from the other night. How that was baloney. The Jets got robbed. And I'm not a big Jets fan, but they got robbed there. I don't know what the NFL was thinking. If they're just trying to placate all the Swiftie fans that all of a sudden started watching NFL games because Taylor is at the games. But that was egregious. That non-holding call on Patrick Mahomes' scamper. And
now hold on. Now I've heard NFL players come out on social media and say that was not a hold. They'd say if that's a hold, everything's a damn hold. He was inside the shoulder pads.
I don't know.
They say that, not me.
I know.
Here.
I know. I'm not a specialist either. But when you see the guy try to do this and he can't get away from the guy, you're supposed to do this with your hands, not this with your hands.
Maybe they thought he was just trying to do the icky shuffle, and they're like, "Well, let him go. I mean, let him try."
Well, there's that, and then the pass interference call, which was, I think, bogus as well. Let him play. I mean, it wasn't that egregious. He wasn't going to catch the ball anyway. So anyway, there's my little 2-second rant about that.
There we go. All right.
I had to get it off my chest.
You get to turn to happier outlooks now. I know you're so fucking excited to talk about this guy, so let's do it.
Yeah, it's a rookie running back, Devon Achane, who has looked really good the last couple weeks, going up against a not good defense. So I expect him to have another great week this week. I know he's splitting time with Mostert there, but it doesn't matter. Even on limited touches, he is getting points, scoring fantasy points by the bunches in this high-powered offense. Oh, excuse me. Give me all the pieces of this offense. And I think he is going to have a great game, just going up against a bad Giants defense. Too many New York teams.
I'll go one more even. I'm going to add on. I believe in Achane so much now. He's an auto start until he proves that he shouldn't be. Mm-hmm. He is just in your lineup along with Mostert. Start them both every single time when you have them on your teams, because you don't want to miss that 40-point fantasy game just because, well, I'll err on the side of caution. Sit this guy.
Yeah.
No, you don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do it.
Absolutely.
All right, well, let's break in here. We have another question in the chat here before we move on. From Hardcore, I'm trading away Amon-Ra St. Brown and Keegan Allen. I think they meant Keenan Allen, but we get it. And Dameon Pierce, all three of them, for Tyreek Hill, Jacoby Myers, and Jerome Ford. Do I accept it? Dustin, I am feeling strong about this. What are your thoughts?
At first I was like, yes, but now I'm like, no. Stick with Amon-Ra and Keenan Allen and Dameon Pierce. You got two guys that are in the probably top 10 wide receivers right now, Keenan Allen and Amon-Ra. Tyreek Hill, while he's amazing, he's putting up stellar numbers. I think he's number one overall wide receivers. That's great. Jacoby Myers, Jerome Ford, Dameon Pierce, they're kind of interchangeable in my book. Maybe Jerome Ford's a slight tick better, but not enough to make the difference here between getting Amon-Ra or keeping Amon-Ra and Keenan Allen.
Yeah, I love Tyreek Hill. He's obviously proved that he's worth every penny that you paid to draft him. But it's the combo deal for me of Amon-Ra and Keenan Allen. I refuse to back away from him. I'm just so excited for one of my drinking buddies to be paying off so fruitfully at this point. It would be malpractice for me to come out and say not to keep Keenan Allen on your team.
Absolutely. Okay, Jake, it's time for our weekly bet here. Is it my turn or your turn?
It is your turn to pick. I did the grossness of the tight ends last week.
That's what I thought. And I was looking ahead of time. The crappy thing here is there's not a lot of like really great games where I'm like, oh, this is the bets we should make. Usually there's like a good matchup. There's not really a whole lot on the docket. I'll give you a choice. Do you want to go gross or just kind of gross?
Look, the fact that we're in this spot where nothing jumps off the page to you right now, I would rather go as gross as we can instead of do some mediocre wager here. Let's go gross.
All right. So let's do the Ravens running backs versus the Steelers running backs.
I take it back. Do the mediocre. Okay, Ravens running back versus Steelers running back. Oh, holy shit! I didn't expect it to hit me so hard when you said it like that. Steelers matchups are supposed to be. Can I include Lamar Jackson in my?
No. I said running backs, not rushers.
Not rushing yards.
Running
all right.
backs.
I'm still going to take, probably foolishly, I'm going to take the Ravens running backs here, and hope that he doesn't vulture away their touchdowns.
All right. Jake takes Baltimore.
God damn it.
I told you it was gross. Here's the other one I was looking at, which probably isn't much better. I was going to say the Texans wide receivers versus the Falcons running backs.
I would have had it. What, you want to double it up? You want to do a double?
Oh, sure, if you want to.
Let's do it. I'm feeling wild tonight, and
Yeah,
I will
Modelo.
if you'll allow me. If you will allow me to choose again. Otherwise, you can. If you have a preference, you can choose.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I want the Houston wide receivers. Let's do it. Let's get Tank Dell back in the positive. Talked about those guys trading off, weeks basically. I'll lock up the week at least of the preferential wide receiver there.
Okay, well, we've got 2 shots for the week next week here, which is great. So, Jake, we got a couple minutes here. Any games you want to highlight? I already said there's not. When you look at the schedule, it's just not a lot of like real super intriguing matchups where you're like, oh, this is going to be a great fantasy game. Any games that stand out to you?
I don't think there's anywhere we're going to have this crazy, wild, high-scoring affair. But I am pretty interested to honestly see how the wide receivers do for the Dolphins versus the Giants. You talked about Achane, obviously, and I love the running backs in that game. but how much do they need to be involved against this kind of team? So that'll be very interesting to watch for. The other one that I am excited about is the Chiefs versus Vikings. I mean, yes, just because Chiefs mostly, but the Vikings are putting up tons of yards. I think that from that perspective, it should be a pretty good back and forth. But obviously, the people in those matchups you're going to be playing anyways. You're starting with Justin Jefferson. You're starting Jordan Addison this week, in my humble opinion. But remember, don't start the Chiefs wide receivers.
No, Travis Kelce or bust.
There you go.
Okay. Well, Jake, do you have any last things to add here before we get off? Get out of here.
Ooh, sassy. Jeez. I just keep in your pants for 2 more minutes, man. As always, we're looking for drunk trades. Most of the time we can't rely on Reddit for everything. So if you have made a drunk trade or plan to make a drunk trade for that matter, submit those to @DrinkingFantasy on Twitter. Even if you're looking for advice about whether you should make that drunk trade, go ahead and send it preemptively, and then we can heckle you before we even get on the show.
Hey, we got a nice little comment here from Joseph Mantooth. Mrs. Mantooth is a saint, but he's
Tell
drinking.
Dorothy we give our best.
That's right. Drinking and thinking about my fantasy football teams as well. This is perfect. Thank you for joining us. It's what we do every single week. So yeah, thank you for hopping in here towards the end of our show. Come get us every single week.
We got a one out of respect for Mrs. Mantooth, for Dorothy. He did ask a question here. Joseph asked Jordan Addison or Michael Thomas in the flex. I'm going to come out here. I just talked about this matchup with the Vikings and Chiefs. It is Jordan Addison for me. What do you think, Dustin?
Same. I think he's got more upside than Michael Thomas does.
That's right.
All right, folks. Well, that will do it. Thank you, everyone, for joining in the chat. If you, as audio listeners catching this after the fact, want to be a part of this, come join us every week on YouTube. We're streaming live, doing our thing, answering questions in the chat. And it's what we love, honestly. We love answering those start-sit questions or roster construction questions for you. So come join us every single week. This is your weekly reminder that to check your waiver wires. People are rage dropping players right now because of bad fantasy performances. So you can pick up those tasty little vittles that people drop and will help your squad. And also be aware, bye weeks do start this week. We've got 4 teams on bye with Cleveland, the Chargers, the Seahawks, and Tampa Bay. So do not start any of those players. They will score you 0 points this week. And hopefully we have no bye apocalypses as we have in previous years, but the start of bye weeks is here, which makes those start-sit questions even more important. So that is what we're here for. If you have more of those, hit up my partner @Jake Trowbridge on Twitter X. You can hit our handle of the show @Drinking Fantasy. You can find me @FF Dusty Dog. And until next week, folks, keep drinking and talking fantasy football.
Cheers, FFers.